Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week, I'm joined by hunky, hairy, huggable homos who love film. That is our trademark phrase, or at least it should be, if we ever fill out the paperwork. Maybe we should get on that, because now someone else might do it ahead of us. Damn it, I shouldn't have said anything. Anyway, we are, movie enthusiasts who also happen to be gay bears, and we're delighted to have friends of gay bears and their admirers enjoying the show and our listenership as well. With me, as usual, are my delectable co-hosts, Jim Poliafco. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is here as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey, movie fans. Glad to have you back with us for another episode.
Yes, indeed. Super glad. You know what else I'm glad for, guys?
What's that, Brad?
I'm really glad for hot chocolate in our Ariel mug, because it's delicious.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
It's so good.
It is about the time of year, at least for those of us living in southern states, where we can actually start drinking like hot chocolate and stuff like that and enjoying it the way it's meant to be enjoyed.
That's right. The rest of you guys have had like hot chocolate and hot apple cider for like 3 months. Now it's our turn. So
we got this cold snap going on. It's like getting down to freezing at night, and it's probably coming your way, Will. So
no, we've got it. Like I've been wearing a coat for the first time this season this week.
'Tis the season, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess.
It is coat weather.
I guess so. Well, speaking of seasons, I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving, those of you here in the United States. I hope you had your freedom turkey. I know we did. It was excellent. Very tasty. For those of you outside the U.S., and we have a surprising amount of listeners from across the globe. I was looking at the map again the other day, and I'm like, really? We have listeners in Turkmenistan? How does that work? But apparently it's a thing. So...
It's really the NSA. It's really the NSA monitoring us, just cloaking their identity.
So, like, let's route that IP address through somewhere in Russia. They'll never know it's us.
Right.
But whatever. Anyway, as we look to ramp up towards the next big holiday, we've got some big stuff coming up. In 3 weeks, we have our 3rd anniversary show, guys.
Ooh,
it's also our Star Wars: The Force Awakens show. Believe it or not, that is getting close.
It's gonna be big.
We haven't even talked about what fun stuff we're gonna do besides reviewing Star Wars. So
it feels like we've barely talked about Star Wars on this show.
We never talk about Star Wars. That's something we should remedy, actually.
Yeah, we should talk about this Star Wars entity a little bit more as we're ramping up over the next few weeks.
We might. Although, just the last couple weeks, we've kind of gotten out of that late summer. Fall movie dust bowl of kind of not so great movies in mainstream release, and we're just now starting to get some good ones, either ones that have been hanging around for a while, just in limited release and are now coming out, or brand new ones. And I'm going to talk about a couple this week, I think.
In fact, we have 2 films on the docket for this week that may be part of exactly what you're talking about, Jim.
Depends how you...
Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll have to see how you guys feel. But we have the Good Dinosaur this week, and Jim, I see you've got your Arlo, the Good Dinosaur, behind you.
Yeah, it's my Arlo. My Arlo, right here.
Aw, Arlo.
Hey, Arlo.
Hey, Arlo.
Are you going to wear a tree loincloth and be Spot?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I couldn't be Spot.
Here, Spot.
Spot's much too young for me. I know. Huh?
Oh, goodness.
Huh?
We'll also be discussing Creed this week as well, the new follow-up film to the Rocky franchise.
Hey, Brad, did you bring your boxing gloves?
You know what? My hands are huge. They might as well be boxing gloves.
Just paint them red and go, right?
Right? I mean, I can palm a basketball on a good day, like with either hand, so I think I'm...
But not on a bad day.
Not on a bad day. I'm like a tyrannosaur trying to
on a good day where they give them small basketballs.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah, well, whatever. Anyway, we have a lot to talk about, guys. Are we ready to just dive right into our first film?
Hey, let's do
Let's
this
do it.
thing.
All right. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with our format, and we do have some new listeners lately, so welcome. Glad to have you. We will give our thoughts spoiler-free on these films, as well as some recommendations as to whether we think you should see them or not before we go deep into the dark territory of Spoilerland. So fret not. We'll let you know when that's coming. But here we go, our discussion of The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Was that loud and pronounced enough for editing?
It was.
I think next one you should start out as a whisper and then go louder.
Should I?
Good Dinosaur!
So kind of like, here we go, our review of The Good Dinosaur.
I love that. It's like
that's like Broadway.
If I had a song queued up, like if this really were like a Disney musical, that's exactly where that song drop would happen.
Yeah, that was a little too Broadway. Yeah.
All right, how about this? Here we go, our review of The Good Dinosaur. All right, so Jim, you have been looking forward to this movie, I think, probably more than me, at least. Not that I wasn't excited, but I know you were like ravenous for it. Maybe you can kick this one off for us. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. The Good Dinosaur. I'll just read a little synopsis first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the movie. The Good Dinosaur imagines a world where the asteroid that we're told wiped out the dinosaurs about 65 million years ago simply whizzed by prehistoric Earth, allowing the dinosaurs to continue to evolve up to the point where man arrives into the picture, and that's where The Good Dinosaur takes place. Which is, and it's a story of a very young Apatosaurus named Arlo, and right here behind me, and a primitive cave boy named Spot, and their adventures. And I don't want to give too much away because we're not really in spoilers about their adventures, but we'll get to those a little later on. This is Pixar's 16th film, and actually the second one this year. I think Toy Story was their first film. I'm not sure if it was exactly their first film. That's something that we could look up. But this being the second one this year, this of course follows in the success of Inside Out, which we reviewed earlier in the year, and we all gave it a big thumbs up. We love that one.
Why does there have to be a second movie the same year
I know.
Came out?
Don't steal my memories.
Hey, Sadness, there's nothing wrong with more than one movie.
That's right. And this year, the reason we got two movies was because The Good Dinosaur was supposed to be released last year, and it got delayed with production issues. So we've got a first-time feature director named Peter Sohn here, who is actually Russell from Up. He was the actual guy who Russell from Up was modeled after in the movie Up. And this one also features the voice talents of Sam Elliott, Anna Paquin, Frances McDormand, Jeffrey Wright, a bunch of others that are voicing some of the characters. Yeah, I was definitely anticipating this movie, very much looking forward to this movie, and I ended up loving this movie in spite of a couple of minor quibbles that I had. It definitely exceeded my expectations, met or exceeded my expectations all the way around. It's probably not what some were expecting from Pixar, especially after and in comparison to Inside Out, which was had a lot of complex ideas going on for a Pixar movie. It was something a little bit of a different story. They examined some human characteristics that really hadn't been dealt with that way. But instead, this time what we got was just really what was like a wonderfully simple, but I thought effective story. Basically, I looked at this as a couple of different things, one of which was kind of like a road movie of Arlo and Spot once it got going. But it was done in this incredibly mythic world that the movie created and the animators created. And I found it to be, even though it was a simple story, just a road movie and a kind of a friendship movie, I guess you could say. I found it great in a lot of ways. The movie was kind of weird. It felt a little bit in tone, almost like a Miyazaki film. It was more than what we would consider like a mainstream Pixar film, with a lot of Pixar films. A lot of times they're pretty frenetic. A lot more comedy, maybe. More of a comedic tone, a lighter tone. This movie went to some pretty dark places in spots, some pretty unexpected places, and also some familiar places, and we'll talk about those too. And this movie was very emotional. I mean, for me, it was quite emotional. There were a few moments in this movie that pretty much wrecked me while I was watching this movie. I thought it was really strong. And it's almost a week later, and I do want to go back and rewatch this one. And all I want to say is that before we get into spoilers and hear from you guys, is it was a big recommend for me. We saw it in 3D. I would recommend we see it in 3D. It's visually, it's astounding animation at a level that I don't think I've ever seen before on the screen, even from Pixar, who are always on the leading edge, Pixar and DreamWorks, and who are kind of always on that leading edge of animation. But yeah, this is a big, get to see this one. I think you might find some surprises in this movie. We'll get into spoilers in a little bit, but I want to hear what you guys thought.
Every once in a while, you run across a movie that really hits you right where it counts. Sorry, that's my terrible Sam Elliott impersonation. Yeah. So, Jim, I probably will echo some of what you say, so I don't want to just copy you. Yes to lots of things, but I would say for me, this definitely is a recommend. Yes, this movie felt more familiar to me, I think, than it did to you. I mean, it was good. I enjoyed it. I cried. I mean, it took me to some good places, but I don't know that it really took me to any unexpected places. I mean, it felt like your basic Land Before Time meets The Lion King. And I don't know, maybe it's because I watch lots of kids' movies and they follow kind of a similar format, but for me, without going into any spoilers, definitely enjoyable. I just felt like, I don't know, maybe they could have done a little more that was a little subversive, I guess, of expectations just from watching the trailer. But I really like the Arlo Spot dynamic. That was awesome. I think they do some really amazing stuff visually. You kind of see where the ending is coming from, like 1,000 miles away, at least I think. But I still enjoyed the journey getting there. From a visual perspective, from an emotional perspective, they did a couple things that were kind of interesting in terms of like people or other dinosaurs or entities that they meet sort of on the way. But again, it just you walk out of it kind of feeling like, well, I've seen this movie done maybe 8 or 9 times before, but this was still a fun twist on maybe a well-established formula. I liked it. I would love to see it again. Had a great soundtrack by the same composer who did the soundtrack for Life of Pi. Right. And you definitely can hear some similarities there. Like Jim, before you even told me that it was the same composer, I was listening and I'm like, man, this sounds so familiar. I didn't really put it together till you told me, and then I'm like, oh, that's why. Okay, that makes total sense. But it's got a phenomenal score, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, good stuff for me, but I think it could have been maybe a little better. But Will, what about you?
I'm going to be the Debbie Downer, I think. I didn't dislike this movie. I think it's perfectly fine. It's a soft recommend. There are a lot of movies in the theaters right now that are going to be more of your like heavy dramas or your close out the year, like last hanging on blockbuster type films like Mockingjay and Star Wars coming up. So there's not a lot of just like children's animated type things. So certainly this fills a gap. You should go see it for that reason alone. But as far as the movie itself, I think the biggest problem this movie had, for me at least, is I think it's going to be an extremely forgettable one. There are certainly some elements of this that I think work really well. This probably has the best background animation of any movie I've ever seen. Like, if I were just judging how good the water features looked or how realistic the trees looked, this would be an A+, 5-star movie. Go see it right away. I think that in and of itself is, it really is a revelation. Past that, though, there are some problems, and there's a lot of places where you can pin these down. I read that this one had a bunch of rewrites and or reworkings kind of early on in the process, and it kind of shows. I think the character design is not. I don't think the character design is as dynamic as the background animation. I don't feel like the characters fit in their environment. The characters are extremely stylized, kind of have this like blocky look to them. The environments look very realistic. And I think both of those are perfectly fine, but they don't really mesh quite well together. I was painfully aware of how unrealistic the characters looked against the background. It took me out of the film. A lot of the story beats are extremely familiar, and that's gonna happen. Like, there's those sayings that every story that's been told has already been told over and over again, and now all we're doing nowadays is just variations on a theme. That said, there are some sequences in this that are extremely familiar. Like, you can trace the DNA of this back to a few different things. I didn't see as much Miyazaki. What I saw was Don Bluth. I saw a lot of Don Bluth here, and Don Bluth is he was the animator who spun off from Disney and did a lot of amazing films, kind of in the kind of early 80s through the mid 90s, things like Secret of NIMH, Land Before Time,
American Tail,
Go to Heaven.
maybe?
American Tail was his. Right. And so he had this alternative look to Disney that had a lot of those same beats, but usually, at least in his heyday, a little darker. And I think some of that comes through here. And part of that might just be me projecting because of The Land Before Time, so I'm not quite sure. I didn't have that moment where I really latched onto the characters and felt what I was supposed to feel. At any given time during this movie, I kind of knew what was going to happen next. Or I didn't kind of know. You could tell it was very transparent what was going to happen next. And with certain films, you can get away with that. You can still be along for the journey, but there was just nothing about these characters or about the world they inhabited that really pulled me in. It's not a bad movie. I would even say it's kind of a lightly good movie, but it's just so familiar. It's really hard to rave about. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, I've some of these things, Will, that you mentioned. I understand. I think where they're coming from. I think from the very beginning, from the time that people saw the first trailer, I think the very like painterly realistic background animation, like groundbreaking stuff that they were doing, versus the character animation design. People were saying, "Oh, this doesn't match. Why are they putting such cartoony characters in such a real-looking world?" And the stuff that I read about it made total sense to me, because they need characters that they can make portray emotions, and a lot of times those emotions are portrayed in this movie without dialogue. There's a lot of scenes in this movie that I thought were very effective without dialogue, and I think to do that you need to have expressive, more expressive characters, and that's the way that the creators, I guess, of this and the animators chose to do that, with characters designs that were much more expressive, in the eyes and the face. Especially of the two main characters, Arlo and Spot. And also, they wanted to show, Will, you mentioned it, you hit it right on the head, and it's a reason why that took you out of the movie, but I think it was intended as a way to illustrate how these characters had trouble fitting into such a hostile, natural environment, that it was supposed to create tension between the characters, these two young characters trying to make their way in this very hostile world with storms and predators and shit that looked like it was gonna just eat them at any moment, and you have these kind of innocent looking, I guess, characters kind of played opposite to that. And I think that was the intent. Will, you said for some people I think that worked. For me, I enjoyed that. For some people I think it like you said, Will, it kind of took you out of the movie a little bit.
Yeah, and I totally get one of the reasons to be stylistic with your character design is to get that expressiveness across. So what I would have preferred them doing, I mean, I'm obviously not the animator, I'm not the director, so I have no say in it. But I would have, in this case, I would have said, hey, let's tone down the backgrounds and let's make them match the character design a bit. What they ended up with was an environment that probably would have worked better in like a tech demo. As opposed to kind of this type of film, or a more grounded film that doesn't need so much expressiveness. I mean, sometimes you have to match your animation style to your story, and I think that there was just something that didn't quite work. It was like you have all of these different pieces of like a fabric all sewn together, and you got a quilt at the end of it, but it's not a pretty one.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's and. You're not alone in that opinion. I think I've seen that a lot. That people didn't like the character designs and I think whether when you appreciate this movie, I think it's something you kind of got to buy into right up front, because if you don't, if it hits you and takes you out of the movie, I think it's gonna affect your enjoyment of the rest of the movie and the story. Brad, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think I just wanted to touch real quick on the point about the expressions. One of the things I really did enjoy was some of the non-dialogue moments where you get some of the emotion without it having to be sort of like hammered over and over and over, like through dialogue, right? Again, without going into spoilers, there's a moment in the trailer, actually, so I can talk about it, where like Arlo like shows his family, right? Like he makes his family of sticks, and Spot's looking at him like all confused, and Arlo's like, "You wouldn't understand," and he like hangs his head. Like that scene, there's more to it in the film, but that scene destroyed me. Like that scene totally killed me in a really good like emotional way, and there was like hardly any dialogue to that at all, right? Really impressive. But then it's countered by the fact that like sometimes when we do get some of the dialogue scenes, it just feels a little excessive sometimes. Like a little repetitive.
I get exactly what you're talking about, and I brought up at the beginning that I had some minor quibbles, and one of those was, so I got to balance this with, I know this is a children's movie, right, primarily, right. And there were some moments that were really on the nose for me, especially early on in the movie. I don't want to spoil anything. Well, yeah, I don't want to spoil it because I did see it in a clip, but it's not in the trailers, where certain things are stated by certain characters as like a pronouncement or a a life lesson or whatever from one character to another, and it's super on the nose, and it's almost like, really, did he have to say that? Because this movie's most effective moments were when there was really no dialogue, and they could have done a lot more with that, I think. I mean, look at kind of in the way the first half of Wall-E was.
Yes.
No dialogue. If this movie had done a little bit more of that, I think it might have been even more effective than it was for me. But again, I know that Wall-E, I'm not sure. That first part probably worked for children to some degree, but I think in this movie, I think they were pandering a little bit too much. Beating some of those themes on the head, and I wish they had backed off that just a little bit for me.
Yeah, when Pixar works best, it's when it does extremely bold things. We got to see complex ideas in Inside Out. We got to see a touching vignette at the beginning of Up. We got to see half of a movie with no dialogue at all in Wall-E. And these are probably three of the higher regarded Pixar movies, and for a reason. When they really say, hey, we're just going to make a movie for the kids, that's when you get films that don't quite work as well, or maybe they're fine by other standards, but they don't quite hold up to the Pixar line, things like Cars and such. I think there are some scenes in here that are really quite good. You mentioned one. We'll talk about it more in spoilers, but the drawing the circle around the characters. There's next to no dialogue in that. Just some kind of framing stuff. And it is.
There are others. Yeah, there are a few others.
Yeah, and those are extremely touching. In fact, I would say that for me, the movie is sort of not a drag, but like the only time I really felt connected was once the Spot character showed up. Kind of the stuff that happened before didn't work for me because it was a lot of characters talking about what was going on. I didn't get to see it as much. The other problem I had with that is that one of the choices this film makes is to make all of the characters kind of based in this like southern atmosphere, like because of everyone
Western,
has this
Western.
yeah, kind of like it's like very southwesty. You've got these like country draws on characters, and what ends up happening, and I get why they're doing it. What they're doing is this film has a sense of quote-unquote location and a sense of like, okay, it makes sense. People from the same region or dinosaurs from the same region would probably talk very similarly. But what you end up with is a lot of characters who, for me, kind of blurred together personality-wise. None of these characters, none of the support characters, let's take Arlo and Spot out of this. None of the support characters that we see are going to be ones that I'm going to remember a year from now. Whereas when I think about some of the more unique choices that Pixar's made in other movies. You've got that whoa bro turtle from Finding Nemo, who I remember that character to this day. He's very different. He's so small. You've got the character who I shan't name from Inside Out, who was super unique because of the way he was portrayed, what he did within the film, how different he was from some of the other characters. I think a lot of the other dinosaurs just blurred together a little bit. Like, if you ask me the personality traits of the this type of dinosaur versus that one, I don't know that I could make a very, very strong case as to what differentiates them. And that's a problem for me.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying, and I see some of that too in some of these characters. The pterodactyl characters, I guess, are a good, and the raptor characters probably. I think there's at least one character in here that stood out for me above Arlo and Spot, not above, but I mean supporting characters that also stood out like Arlo and Spot did, and that would be Butch, the main T-Rex, voiced by Sam Elliott. He
Right.
For me anyway, definitely a standout character. But you're right. I mean, Arlo and Spot were the stars of this movie, and then probably other characters in the Pixar pantheon, that some of which you mentioned, Will, that just kind of stick in your mind a little bit more. But yeah, I guess for me, I guess I just enjoyed seeing the nuance and detail that was put into not just the backgrounds, but some of the characters too. I kind of knew what I was getting going into this movie, so maybe that helped me buy into it a little bit more, as opposed to being off-put by the way the characters were done against the background and so forth. But yeah, it just worked really well for me. Brad, do you have anything to say, or you want to get into spoilers? Or
I'm thinking at this point we probably, because we still have a whole nother movie to discuss, we probably should just make the jump to spoilers. That way we don't have to dance around things so much.
Sure.
Yeah, let's spoiler it. Yeah.
Okay. So spoilers, officially fair game for The Good Dinosaur. If you haven't seen it yet, don't want to be spoiled, come back in about 10 minutes or so and rejoin us for our Creed discussion. Spoilers.
We talked about that one scene, the kind of the orphans, they're both discovering that they're orphans, and they're sharing their stories in a pretty much almost totally wordless manner. That was a really effective scene. There was another scene later on where Arlo had to say goodbye to Spot because other humans appeared on the scene, and he pretty much had to go with the his own kind, I guess, to survive. And the split up, because for me anyway, the bond between Arlo and Spot, I think, was very effective and very well done in the movie.
Absolutely.
To the point where they had to part, you really felt something. The way that was done, echoing the circle in the sand and those kind of things, I thought that was really effective. I don't know what you guys thought about that, but then there's the one scene that a lot of people are talking about where you say it's very familiar, and that's what I'll call the
Mufasa scene?
Well, yeah, the Mufasa scene, I guess it was a dream in this movie, not a vision. It was more of a dream. I think he was actually asleep. He had been knocked out.
Right.
So that there was a difference there. The dad comes back and he echoes a lot of the things that he says.
More, kid.
Right. Which came from The Lion King, which came from Kimba the White Lion, which came from God knows what, Will. I don't know. You mentioned Hamlet.
It goes back to Hamlet. The story of the Lion King goes all the way back to Hamlet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, we've seen this before. I still, though, that I've seen it before, and I told myself, yep, I saw that scene before. I thought it was pretty effective the way it was done in this movie, the way they showed it with the, he didn't appear in the clouds, thank God, but he, he's walking and there's no footsteps, and, I thought that was pretty effective, at least for me.
I think the problem I had with some of these was that some of these shots, especially early on with the father, I guess Papa's death is the one that I want to kind of fall over to.
Yeah.
Papa! The shots were so damn similar to The Lion King.
Oh my God!
That it kept reminding me of the film. Like, it's okay for a film to borrow similar DNA, but there's a shot where Papa is there's a valley. And the water is rushing down, almost as though it was like a herd of like wildebeest or something.
And Arlo is above him. Arlo is above him, right?
And he looks up. Papa looks up as he's like kind of like grasping for safety, and then he's washed away into it. Like, it is, not shot for shot, but it is so reminiscent that you can't help but be reminded of it. I think the filmmakers, I hate to...
They had to have known that.
They had to have known. Like, if you work in animation and you don't know about the death of Lion King, the death of Mufasa in the Lion King scene, you haven't been doing your homework. So I think they had to have known, and I think they were okay with it. They were probably banking on the idea that it would draw some positive parallels.
Like more of an homage than too heavy borrowing on it. Right.
But instead, like, I watched that and I was thinking, like, man, it was really rough when Mufasa died. Not like, oh, it's really rough that Papa's dying right now. And then that scene later on that you're talking about when he comes back as a ghost, it really depends on you buying into the death of Papa earlier in the movie. So when he comes back in the end, since I didn't buy into it, I'm just like, of course his dad ghost is going to come back. So it's one of those things where if the first domino doesn't fall, the rest can't.
One thing I did like, though, about that scene that was a little bit different from the Mufasa in the cloud scene, that I just want to call out is, like, initially the dad is like leading Arlo away.
Silent.
Like, not talking. He's silent, right? And I didn't even notice the lack of footsteps until Arlo notices it, right? So I'm actually kind of like, well,
is this really the dad?
Like, I mean, we didn't see the body of the dad. Like, did they just assume, you know what I mean, that he died? Like, is he actually, like, and then, I get it. Then I start to realize, oh, okay. Whereas, like, with the Mufasa in the cloud scene, because he's in the clouds, like, obviously he's not, like, motherfucking still alive, right? You get it right away. Right. So I kind of like that it put a little question mark on it for a split second, and then just when I started to become maybe a little comfortable with the idea that maybe Dad somehow escaped, it's like,
he's not answering.
Oh no, of course he would answer. He would talk to Arlo. Like, wait, and then it's like, oh, now I'm even sadder. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I like that he talked. In things that he said earlier, like, it's not like a new dialogue, you know what I mean? It's like not like a new
exactly the same
scene.
line. Yeah.
It's Arlo remembering what his dad said, and I'm getting a little misty as I think about it. It's Arlo remembering what his dad said, but in kind of a stitched together sort of dream that gives Arlo what he needs, right?
I mean, it's derivative as it may, that scene may be. And I can understand the death scene definitely looking almost exactly like, but that scene was just different enough for me to be effective as for what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, Ghost Papa to me wasn't derivative. The
Dream
death
Papa.
sequence, the death sequence was, but the problem is I couldn't buy into that because of the death sequence.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know I've been really down on this. I don't want you to think that I hate this movie or anything like that. This is a subpar Pixar movie for me. The thing is that a subpar Pixar movie is still like
pretty good entertainment.
Leaps bounds above the field, Right. So like it's disappointing, but only because like I've seen them knock it out of the park, and I think this is just like a ground rule double.
No, Will. All the complaints you have been, I've read a few reviews, and some of the same things I'm hearing, about this film. Little knocks here and there that say, yeah, it's not the best Pixar film, but it's an okay Pixar film. And boy, have they had a lot of fun with the Good Dinosaur and the title of the movie. And I mean, some people didn't even understand what the title really meant. You know what I mean? In the context of the movie, and that's a little frustrating when the movie, maybe left people scratching their heads about, well, were there bad dinosaurs? Blah blah blah. So it's a little rough.
I gotta say, one of the things that it really resonated with me as I look at my timer with 3 minutes and 18 seconds left. This movie, I want to talk about the whole making your mark thing. That actually has stayed with me since the end of the movie. I think about like my personal journey through life and like how I want to make a mark on the world, right? And when I saw the scene at the beginning when like Papa builds the silo or whatever, and he like puts his mark up on the thing, and he's like, "Okay, I made my mark. You've got to earn your mark." It sort of got me thinking about like, what have I done in my life? Like, what am I doing to like make my
bigger than yourself, basically.
Right, bigger than myself. Like, where am I putting my big giant good day palming a basketball hands like on the earth, right? And I liked that. I thought that was cool. And Jim, you've been wearing this Good Dinosaur shirt you had for like 3 months now, and I didn't really understand what it was all about. If you guys haven't seen it, it's basically like a simplified, it's like a simplified like green outline of Arlo, like a filled in, and then it's got like a hollow human handprint on the body, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of interesting. I don't really get it, and the movie doesn't even like give you that same visual.
Not overtly.
Right. You never see like Spot put his hand on Arlo's side and make a mark on him or something, but like walking out of the movie, Jim was wearing that shirt, and I looked at it, and I was like, wow, like that is kind of awesome. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I appreciated that aspect of it a lot.
Yeah.
I would have preferred, honestly, if the closing sequence of the film had maybe included that image. Like, if it had... Like, I'm not saying that it needed to have been, like, over the top and maudlin, but imagine if the very last shot isn't him doing it, but just, like, a cave wall with that dinosaur just kind of, like, you just kind of have that, like, oh, my God, this is definitely something Spot's keeping with him for forever.
Right.
I think that would have been a really stellar closing, kind of on top of kind of the emotional beats that already happened.
Yeah. Just a lot of, I mean, a couple of quick things. I know we're out of time, but the just a lot of details that went into these character designs, like things that maybe you don't notice the first time through, but since I've been kind of into this movie a little bit more, like the eye color, like Arlo's eyes were the color of Spot's skin, and Spot's eyes were green, and so it's just kind of this, what do you call it, synchronicity or whatever of character. One other moment that I really liked was the Sky Sharks moment, where the fins are sticking out like from below the clouds, or the snouts of the pterodactyls are kind of circling and through the clouds, and you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, it looks really scary. Yeah. And then boom, the pterodactyls come out. We can't leave until we talk about the short.
Yes, we should talk about the short.
Oh, yeah, the short.
Finally, we get what I thought was a really good short in front of this movie. Something a little bit different. Had a very frenetic and exciting animation style for Pixar. The story was very much Pixar, very simple story about the relationship between a father and a son. It's called Sanjay's Super Team. Do one of you guys want to talk about your impressions of that short?
It was good.
I really love this. I wanted it to be the feature. I love the fact that it played on the role of like religion in this young boy's life. Compared to like, the whole like pantheon of the gods versus like superheroes, which is a very common modern theme. It switched animation styles appropriately when it needed to, and I love that it focused on Hindu as the religion in this. I think that it was really nice seeing this type of story told through this type of lens. After what was the last one we had, the lava one, which I hated before Inside Out. I really enjoyed Sanjay's Super Team.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent too. I mean, from an animation standpoint, it was certainly great. But just from sort of a religion standpoint, I thought it had something cool to say about sort of the dichotomy between like kids growing up with stories of superheroes and kids growing up with stories of like gods and how all that works. And I don't want to spoil anyone on the short. We don't need a spoiler section for it, but I thought it was really neat how the two sort of became integrated and fused together.
Yeah.
And it made me really want to go back and like
Yeah.
have a Jesus and the Super Friends like comic book or something.
Yeah. Plus, I know nothing about Hinduism, but I'm like,
Right.
wow, what are these three deities and like, do they have superpowers? Like, how? I want to know, like, because I'm sure there's a whole depth behind this.
Right.
This was actually kind of a true story. The guy who directed this, who is the director of the Good Dinosaur's director's good friend from college, he had a family life like this. He had this kind of relationship with his father. He was into the TV stuff and the superheroes. While his dad wanted him to go to prayer, and he wrote this as kind of a autobiographical little short, and I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm much more impressed with this short than I was Lava. But guys, we have a whole nother movie to discuss. Are we ready to move on? How are we?
Let's do it.
All right, good. All right, abrupt change of gears, but we have a whole lot more discussion coming. So here comes our discussion of Creed. All right, so Will, why don't you set this one up for us? Tell us a little bit about this film and your initial thoughts. Is it worth checking out?
Yeah, so I've been looking forward to this one quite a bit. Like this is an interesting episode for us because we called up both of these movies in our most anticipated end of year movies episode a couple months back. So it's nice for us to be able to revisit them here. So I've had my eye on Creed for a bit. I was so happy that I ended up enjoying this film so much. Here's the quick synopsis. This is the 7th film in the Rocky series. Sylvester Stallone is a boxer. It's very much part of the zeitgeist at this point, right? Creed follows young Adonis Creed, played by stellar young actor Michael B. Jordan, who we've seen from such things as Fantastic Four, and probably better like Chronicle and
Fruitvale Station.
Yep. Which certainly, especially with the connection to director Ryan Coogler, they're such a damn good pair. But anyway, young Adonis Creed, he is the son of famed boxer Apollo Creed. He's striving to make a name for himself in the world of boxing, with Rocky Balboa himself as his coach. I mentioned before, I really love this movie. I think this movie ended up delivering everything that I was looking for and more. I've been really hard on the idea of like remakes and reboots this year. I think a few times this year it's come up, and I've really kind of harped, probably excessively, about the fact that I'm really bothered by these types of films that are made without purpose, or rather any purpose other than just like, hey, remember this familiar thing? Come see our movie. This movie here is the type of sequel that has purpose, the type of sequel that needs to be made. It draws upon that mythology and the lore of its source material while injecting new life and telling a new story that echoes shades of the past. I think it's really brilliant the way that everything came together here. Ryan Coogler, this is his second feature after Fruitvale Station. This dude's on the right track. I mean, he is 2 for 2. Michael B. Jordan washed the stink of Fantastic Four off of him really quick, and that's good too. I mean, this is a guy who I think it would be very easy if he had just kind of languished in some of those roles like that. We could be talking about how his star has fallen, but instead, people aren't going to remember him and his role in that movie when they're talking about 2015. They're going to be talking about Creed. But I also need to talk about Sylvester Stallone. Dude's got chops, and we forget that sometimes. But when he gives us some of the more emotional scenes in this movie, you remember why the Rocky films were so successful. You remember why we look back so fondly to them. There's some great fight sequences. I'm not a huge boxing fan. Like every so often, I'll watch a match, and I can be interested for a few minutes. but I don't tune in all the time. It's not my thing. But dude, if the boxing sequences like in real life were as well choreographed as they were in this movie, I would be watching boxing left and right. I would be running out all of my money on these pay-per-view events. They were so thrilling. Some of them are shot in one shot. That's really cool. The ones that aren't are very well edited. The pace is great. There's also some great music in this stuff, especially the original stuff by Tessa Thompson. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me so much of this musician named FKA Twigs, who I absolutely adore. There's so much I love about this movie. I don't know where it's going to fall in terms of top 10 lists, because that's the type of thing that we talk about this time of year. But it is certainly up there. It is certainly a movie that I enjoy. And it's one of those movies that I'm going to highly recommend to anyone that's ever heard of the Rocky movies, which, hey, is probably all of you. You should go see Creed. It's really damn good. What did you guys think?
Oh, boy. Yeah, this was a really pleasant surprise for me as well. We had seen the trailers. I know, Will, you were looking forward to it. So were we. I just wanted to see, Michael B. Jordan stretch it out a little bit and see what he could do. I wasn't even really, I knew that Stallone was going to be in this. I wasn't expecting the performance we got from him, which was the surprise of this movie. I think we knew that Michael B. Jordan had the chops, that he was, going to continue to grow, and he did in this role. He was perfect, I think, for this young, talented, but troubled fighter, trying to fight his way out from, under the shadow of his dad. And here we go again with the familiar tropes, right? But, I would have to agree with you. I think this is probably one of the best jobs of a franchise reboot that I can remember. And yeah, this movie was really good. It was a pleasant surprise. It makes me wonder why Stallone's been kind of fucking around with movies like Expendables 3 and some of the other crap that he's done. If he's got chops like that, maybe he feels like he doesn't have to prove anything, and this is more of a labor of love for him than just a paycheck, obviously. But like I said, I really like this. Will, you mentioned the long takes. Some of those were really wow moments for me. Like there was one in a fight scene early on. I'm not going to give anything away here in spoilers, but then there was one later on in another fight scene of the scene before the fight, from like the locker room prep out through the arena, through the crowd into the ring. I don't know if that was a complete one-shot take, because it was a moment where actually the screen went black as he was walking through one part. They could have cut it there for all we know. But it felt like a one long take, and it was like take your breath away stuff. The fighting scenes were great. I think I also loved how some of the references back to the Rocky series were done. They weren't really... Yeah, sure. This was about Apollo Creed's son, Adonis or Donnie, and so you had that whole thing, and that was the strong narrative line. But they touched on some events that happened in some of the other movies without giving you like a pile of exposition. You know what I mean? Oh, well, my wife died when she did this, and I got blah blah. It was. I thought it was woven into the narrative of this movie pretty well. There are some things, and we'll talk about them in spoilers, that I didn't really resonate with in this movie, but still a very good movie. I would recommend it, that people go out and see it. Even if you don't like boxing movies, I think there's enough other stuff here that's worth going to see.
I hate boxing movies. As a general rule, I do. I hate watching boxing on TV. Doesn't interest me at all. Ultimate Fighting? Don't give a shit. Sorry. There's only one other boxing movie that has ever grabbed my attention before, and that was The Fighter with Christian Bale and Maki Mak. That I felt like got me sort of interested in the sport a little bit, and that was a weird thing for me. Like I had to deprogram myself like away from boxing after that movie a little bit. So going into this film, we were talking about how this is one of those movies that we've looked forward to this year. And while, yes, that's technically true, I have kind of looked forward to it because I liked some of the earlier Rocky films. I don't think I was on quite the same level as you guys in terms of like, oh my gosh, Creed is coming out. I can't wait to see it. I'm like, I'll see it. It has to be better than Rocky 4. And I have to say, holy crap! I want to start watching HBO fights now. Like I don't know. Like it just
they probably won't be as good as this movie.
I'm sure
right?
they won't. I'm positive they won't actually. So that'll cure me of that real quick. But I just cannot believe how well this film captured sort of the frenetic action and power of boxing, while also giving us sort of this like emotional journey of Apollo Creed's son, and we'll talk more about it in spoilers, but I like how he was trying to like do his own thing without standing on the slab of what's come before. I really expected Stallone was just going to be kind of a cameo, you know what I mean? Like he was going to be there and like maybe you
go, kid.
Maybe Donnie just has this moment where he comes to the gym and sees Rocky watching him, and there's like a throwaway line of dialogue, you know what I mean, and that's it. I did not expect Stallone to be as present as he was in this film and have so much to do and so much going on. I was very, very impressed with Stallone in this film, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he gets a Best Supporting nod. I was blown away by him. I cannot say that enough.
I probably count on it.
Yeah. Michael B. Jordan. Holy crap, guys! This guy just continues to impress. Fantastic Four aside, I think that's not necessarily his fault, but he has just been so amazing in the things that he has been doing and the projects that he's been picking, and I'm thrilled to see him do so well in this film. There were some moments where it's kind of like, ugh, this is totally like stereotypical, like whatever. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those. But the stuff that really counted, I mean, he brought it. He brought it and then some. Like, it just totally was amazed by this kid, and can't wait to see what he continues to do. Some other things that I would just call out here. I do think that the female romance lead was kind of bland for me. I wasn't really so much interested in that story. Again, we'll talk more in spoilers. They tried to make her like special and have this emotional thing, and for me, it just sort of came off as convoluted and flat, unfortunately. But Jim, you mentioned sort of appreciating how some of the callbacks were woven in, right, rather than expressly stated.
Yeah.
I like that too. But since I did not go back and watch Rocky 1 through 4 before I went to see Creed, and it's been 15 years since I've seen a Rocky movie, I actually wish there was a little more of some of those things. Only because, like, nods are great, and I love nods, don't get me wrong, and I don't want to be, like, hammered over the head with them per se. But, I mean, you could throw a little bit more. Like, who was this guy again, and what was that about? And, I like some of the callbacks, but I found myself questioning, like, wait, what was that about again? And while I'm mentally trying to remember, like, I'm getting far behind with what's going on the screen. And maybe that's my fault for not going and seeing these other movies, but I also think about new audiences, right? Because a newer generation is potentially going to go see this movie, right? And I don't know that they're all going to go watch Rocky 1 through 4. And I think they're going to be asking some of the same questions that I was. So I think it kind of detracts a little bit sometimes, while also being good service to the previous films and others. I'd say overall, I mean, this one is a solid A for me, guys. This was a great film. Probably going to, Will, you mentioned the top 10 earlier. I know we're going to have that discussion at some point. I'm not quite sure if this is going to fall in there. I'll be surprised if it won't. But, again, I just can't believe for a frickin' boxing movie, even if this wasn't a Rocky movie, right? If this was just a movie about an up-and-coming fighter and what he was going through, and it wasn't Sylvester Stallone teaching him, if it was done sort of in the same style, I think it probably would have grabbed my attention similarly with the action. And, having seen Fruitvale Station, there was some action in that film, but, I mean, it's kind of a different animal. Right?
Yeah, it's a completely
totally different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Different feel altogether, which kind of astounds me. I mean, Ryan, is it Ryan Coogler?
Coogler, yeah.
Coogler.
Yeah, I'm like, this, he must have, like, where did these, like, action scene, boxing scene, like, chops come from? Like, where did he learn this shit? Because he must have had a ganga experienced DP on this to get some of those shots, because this isn't like a second or third time director getting some of these shots. It just kind of blew me away. Like, there had to be some connection. Of course, now don't forget, Stallone was not credited as a director, co-director, or a co-writer of this movie, but he was a producer, and I'm thinking that he probably had way more to do than just give money to this movie. And he's got the experience. So if he's guiding Coogler, then that might explain where some of these amazing sequences came from. But yeah, Brad, I'll echo with you. I didn't really buy into the whole the whole relationship that much. It seemed like, well, it's a boxing movie. It's about a boxer. You got to have a love interest. So here, we'll throw this one in. Will, I wasn't as enamored with the music as you were, especially her music. Maybe the score. Maybe the score. Yeah, it's just not my thing, man. I don't know what it was. Like, yeah, especially when she was in the club there. And that's a taste thing. It's just not. That wasn't my thing. But the other thing that really, well, I'm not gonna get into spoilers till we get spoilers. But there's one other thing that I want to talk about in spoilers that kind of got me.
Yeah, I really liked Tessa Thompson in this, the female lead in this. She's the same lead. She was in Dear White People, which was not, for me, a great movie, but I think what she did in that was quite good, and I liked what she did here. I think she was a very, very compelling female lead for this film. I think that the relationship between them did exactly what it was supposed to do, because this isn't a romance movie. This isn't a movie about this. This is a movie that is about the relationship between Creed and Rocky. The relationship is this movie is all about kind of which is funny because it's the same thing I disliked in the Good Dinosaur. I like so much here. Is how much it kind of falls into the familiarity, like, and this is the relationship like Rocky and Adrian from the Rocky movies. But yeah, the cinematographer on this, one of the things I thought was pretty neat. It's Marisa Alberti. She's the same cinematographer who did 2008's The Wrestler, which is another movie that's about like professional sports, but more from like the kind of the hardships and the heart and all of that stuff that goes into it. So definitely the right person for this. There's so much I enjoyed here. And I'm sorry you didn't care for the music as much. It is one of those things where it is a very it is a very modern evolution of a style. Like what we're hearing from her is very similar to artists that have come out like within the last year or so. Like this isn't like even within the genre of kind of like R&B, hip hop, etc. That's like those are genres that have long roots, and you could have put her kind of as like being more of like a Mary J. Blige's sounding character or something like that. But they went with something extremely contemporary, and mileage will vary. But for me, I think that was a feather in this movie's hat.
For me, it probably explains why I don't listen to the radio. So,
this is.
Do they even have radio anymore? Really?
Yeah. This is. To be fair, this isn't. Yeah. The type of stuff that they're imitating here is less radio and more like. That one obnoxious friend who's like, "Oh man, you've got to listen to this this new underground."
There's always that one hipster friend.
Yeah, I do, and we don't hang out anymore.
Yeah.
So.
But anyway, the music kind of falls in that category.
No. Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad
it wasn't so much the music, I think, that turned me off to that character. It felt a little tacked on. She was no Adrian, that's for sure. In terms of her importance to the story, and especially later on in the movie. I understand that she provided him kind of a stabilizing influence in his life, and I think that was good. Yeah. But later on in the movie, when it got down to brass tacks, she was in it, but she really wasn't in it. Like, she wasn't a factor, toward the end. And it kept taking me out of the movie, like, why is she in this scene if, I don't know. She's there, but she's not there. It was interesting. But...
Well, guys, I think we're getting to the point where it's hard to talk about some of this stuff without going into spoiler territory.
Yeah.
Are we comfortable with making that switch?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So spoilers for Creed are officially fair game. If you continue to listen and don't want to be spoiled, well, it's your own damn fault if you find out something you didn't want to know. So step away for 10 minutes if you've not seen it yet and want to preserve your innocence. Come back in a little while, catch us for plugs. Otherwise, we're going to move forward. One thing I want to talk about, just to kick this whole thing off, we've been talking a lot about Stallone and his role and what's going on with him. I want to know what you guys thought of the whole, like, oh my God, Rocky has cancer thing. Like, did that seem a little, like, eye roll worthy to you guys, or did you really, like, sort of embrace it and run with it?
You know, in theory, if you were just to tell me the bullet point plot points of this film, I would say that all of them are kind of hokey. But the way they actually come across on screen, I bought into it. Like, you know, the film, again, it's one of those things where the first domino, like, connected. Like, I started to feel for the relationship between the two. I really cared when there was a strain between their relationship. I really wanted these two to have that bonding, that almost surrogate father-son relationship that was forming. So by the time that reveal happened, it was like, yeah, you kind of saw it coming a mile away. But because they had set up everything so well before, and because I was so invested in the characters, I just wanted to see how they resolved it. So for me, it worked really well.
Yeah, I think when the first thing, you know, you could kind of see it coming from a mile away, right? The way they were setting it up. He mentioned Adrian dying of cancer,
Right.
and then like 2 scenes later, he's being diagnosed with cancer, and my eyes were rolling at that point. But you're right, Will. It could have been much worse than it was.
Right.
I think kind of that's kind of what I'm hearing a little bit, is that thing can be handled pretty clunkily. And in this movie, I thought they handled it as best they could. If they had to put a Rocky has cancer scene in it, you know, or a thread in this, I thought they handled it pretty well. You know, it could have been a lot worse. You could have had Rocky dying on his cancer bed while what's his name was fighting in the ring, and every punch he throws, you know, every breath Stallone takes. I mean, it could have gotten really bad, but they handled it pretty tastefully, I thought, even though I probably could have done it. They probably could have done it in a less, let's just say, familiar way. You know, it seems like, again, I mean, we talked about this in the Good Dinosaur too. Like, we've seen this before. You know, old dude, you know, father figure gets cancer, and you know, the bond develops. It's you know, I mean, it's kind of the same thing, and it was handled okay in this movie. And it didn't bother me that much, but I could have done without it.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's certainly some room for improvement in the way that it was handled. Like, I couldn't help but laugh. Like, Rocky comes in, he's walking like through the gym, and the pamphlets are sticking up, and the word leukemia is like right above like the line of his pocket, and then he like hangs his jacket up on the hook, and it like lingers there for a second, right? Like, and then Michael B. Jordan like sees it, goes over, pulls him out, and he's like, "Yo, Rocky, like, what the hell's going on?" And Rocky's like, "Oh yeah, oh kid, leukemia, whatever," you know. And so, but that said, it could have been very Lifetime movie of the weeky, you know what I mean? Like, he totally could have sat him down and had this like long drawn out maudlin discussion, and it could have been worse, I guess.
Credit to the movie for not making it worse.
Right, absolutely. And I think some of the things that they did with Michael B. Jordan's character, you know, Donnie trying to get Rocky to fight, was actually interesting to me. Like, you know, coming from the previous movies, you know, Rocky's like this driving force. Like in the first film, man, he's so like inspired to make his mark. You know what I mean? And it's interesting to see Rocky sort of like defeated in spirit. You know what I mean? And this kid kind of comes along and reinvigorates him, kind of re-sparks some of that energy. And I thought that was interesting. I liked that a lot. Will, you've been trying to talk for like 8 seconds. Go for it.
No, make it 10. No, I think that's the other thing that's so important. I think about the cancer and all of that stuff for this film, and why it's, I think, kind of needed. Is because as much as this is the Michael B. Jordan story, as much as this is Creed's story, and as much as this is a film that, yes, you can technically watch without having watched the rest of the Rocky movies, this is the 7th in the seventh film telling the story of the Rocky character as well. So this gives him another fight. This gives him another part of his story. I think if they had minimized his role the way I think, Brad, you had mentioned you were worried that he would just be kind of there in the background, I think that would have done the character of Rocky more of a disservice because he would have been a cameo character in his own franchise. But here, he carries a lot of emotional weight. Yeah, he's not in the ring anymore. The last time he was in the ring was in the 2006 movie, which was I think just called Rocky Balboa. Here he's not getting in the ring anymore, but he's got other fights to fight, and we're invested in what those fights are. So yeah, I as much as I think if I was just reading these plot points on paper, I might have a problem with them. I think the film did a good job with them. I liked the way that this film all came together. This was a really good mishmash of things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what do you guys think of the end? So let's talk about that a little bit, right? Like Creed goes up against this totally crazy like opponent that he shouldn't even be allowed to fight because he really hasn't like earned his way to the top to fight this guy, right? It's all on the basis of the
he's only fought in Mexico.
Creed name. Right, exactly, right. And so he goes into this fight and he's not expected to do anything really, but he loses the fight but wins the night apparently because he subverted expectations so much. Did that ring true for you? Did that feel?
I mean, it's like typical Rocky. It's exactly what happened in the first movie. Almost exactly. I mean, the big champion at the time. Well, the spoilers for Rocky, by the way, we might spoil.
I think we're fine. We can spoil Rocky.
The big champion at the time, Apollo Creed. He wants to have a fight, and he picks this young up and coming nobody to fight against, and Rocky has something to prove, and he goes in the ring and he goes toe to toe with the guy and earns the respect of the crowd and the moviegoers and his opponent, and he loses the fight on a split decision, just like Adonis does in this movie. So it echoed the first movie very well. I thought that was a brilliant touch, that he didn't come back all the way and against all odds actually win the fight. Because if you know anything about boxing, it's very difficult as an underdog to come in and beat a champion. You've pretty much got to knock him out of the fight. If you get to a decision, chances are the judges are going to rule in favor of the champion, and that's kind of the way sports in general goes too. So yeah, there was nothing wrong with that. I thought the fighting scenes were fantastic. Really got me excited, the kind of edge of my seat stuff. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine. I thought the ending was great.
Yeah, and the fact that this is a character who had so much like misdirected like anger in him. Like, this is a character who throughout the film had the I've got to make my own name for myself. I hate my father because he left me by dying thing. There's a lot of anger that Adonis had in him, and for him to get to the end and celebrate the moral victory, I thought was really cool. Like, it showed not only did he like prove himself in the ring, but I think he also proved himself as a man there in being able to like claim what was a victory. He wasn't an asshole at the end of it. He wasn't like, oh man, I lost. He was like, I hung in there and did well, and people are now cheering for me where they were booing before. And we even got that. I really liked that little moment where the former champion was just like, yeah, you did really good, guy. Like, I loved that kind of like when they hugged it out there at the end. I thought that was like, it was very short, but I thought that was really cool. And it reminded me of the rivalry between Rocky and Apollo that turned into a friendship. Like, I wonder if in the next movie if they're going to be friends. Who knows?
Yeah, it definitely echoed like what really happens. You have that all that shenanigans that happens in kind of in that pre-fight press conference, where guys, sometimes they're yelling at each other, and the corner, the trainers are holding them back, like, yeah, what are you gonna do? I'll show you in the ring. A lot of that is for show, In this movie, it wasn't. It seemed like it was, legitimate, I guess, in this movie. But I was just laughing because I was thinking back to like, Brad said, he had resentment against his father for leaving him too early, and he was a bastard son, so he had to deal with that. But like, we even got a ghost dad scene in this movie. Right? Do you remember the shadow boxing scene where he was like he's fighting his dad? He's like punching like Rocky was punching him when they were playing the fight scene back. So it was kind of funny that both
we did have
both movies had ghost dads.
Especially when Apollo Creed showed up and he was like, "Remember."
Yeah.
Totally.
Everything the light touches will someday be yours, Adonis.
You're me and more.
Oh goodness! All right. Well, I think this was very much a solid recommend for all of us. Then.
Yeah.
Definitely go out and see this movie. There's, I don't know. Like, do you think this is going to be any kind of nomination for Michael B. Jordan?
I think Michael B. Jordan's got a tough road to climb. You look at the field for Best Actor, and you're going to see DiCaprio for The Revenant. Depending on how things go with Spotlight, you can see Ruffalo and Keaton either in both nominated as supporting or both nominated as lead. I think those guys can go a lot of places. I think Michael B. Jordan's got a rough road ahead for that. I think Stallone is the front runner for supporting actor. In fact, I look at that field and I think that he's probably going to be up against like Keaton and Ruffalo maybe for Spotlight, depending on how they do them. There was the dude from Bridge of Spies.
Right.
There was depending on what they do. If The Revenant does well, Tom Hardy may be in that. But I think Stallone is definitely a front runner. I think Stallone maybe walking. I'm planting my flag on it right now. I think Stallone is going to be the Oscar supporting actor winner this year.
Could be.
Yeah, I think for supporting, who knows about Michael B. Jordan? Now, if he was like somehow afflicted or affected, and he was a boxing champion and gave this performance, then he might get it.
Then he would. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Plus Oscars, they love a comeback story like this, right? Like and this is exactly what the people that don't like the Oscars, this is part of why because there's certainly like a narrative that happens as opposed to just and for me I it's whatever. It was
like when Travolta came back in Pulp Fiction, right?
Yeah.
I mean it's the same kind of thing. Like
comeback
they love a redemption story. Yeah.
It's true. That is true. Well, definitely go check this one out if you have not already. And it looks like some people wanted to save themselves, guys, because we had like 6 people step away after we gave the spoiler warning. So come back after you've seen the movie.
Come back, Shane.
Yeah, come back. For those of you that walked away, you should now be hearing us. Come back.
That's right.
Adrian!
That doesn't work, right?
Adrian, come back!
Come back! Come back!
We'll just assume that they're cyclically linked to us, and they're like, oh, I think they're getting ready to go to plugs. Let's
here we
hop
go.
back on for that.
I'll summon them back. Ready?
Oh, wow.
Like 4 more just dropped off. What the hell are these dudes doing?
Oh, goodness. Well, how about some plugs, guys? Are we ready for that? Are we ready to move on to
let's
plugs?
plug.
All right, cool. So I was very delighted. We saw 4 movies this weekend. And, Jim, I'm not going to talk about any of them, so if you're wanting to plug one of the other 2 we saw, feel free. But I was very delighted to see a trailer for a movie that we saw last March at South by Southwest that I didn't know when it was going to get a release date. Apparently now it has one, March 11th, 2016. That's Hello, My Name is Doris, starring Sally Field. Couldn't believe finally got to see this trailer. This is like my favorite film from South by Southwest. It's unfortunate that The Intern has already come out with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway or whatever. Was it Anne Hathaway? No. Yes.
Yes.
It was Anne Hathaway.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen that movie yet. I don't know, how it stacks up. They kind of have a similar theme going on. But anyway, guys, if you are looking forward in time a little bit. I know March is kind of a ways away, but put it on your radar. Hello, my name is Doris. Phenomenal film. I think you'll love it. You're bound to see the trailer if you're out seeing movies anytime within the next couple weeks, so be on the lookout for it. But Will, what have you got?
Oh, gee. Yeah, the one I'm gonna plug this week. Okay, yeah. I finished Netflix's Jessica Jones, and I want to rave about it.
No spoilers.
No, I won't. Like, I won't tell you guys about how the final sequence is this beautifully crafted. Yeah.
Muting you right now.
13 episodes of just really, really solid performance. This is something where if you are not familiar with this character, and a lot of people aren't, she's not a marquee Marvel character. She's only been in the... She was created in 2001, so she's not one of those characters who has like decades and decades of lore to draw upon. But what she is a kind of a gritty noir detective who happens to have a superpower, dealing with the street level stuff in this world where superheroism kind of lurks in the background. The lead in this is Kristen Ritter, and she is so abrasively delightful. The supporting roles, kind of like with Daredevil, I think the thing that I enjoyed so much about these series is the supporting characters and the supporting actors carry so much of the weight. Like, every character that pops on screen has growth, has development, has an arc, becomes someone that you're rooting for or rooting against or what have you. And in fact, I can immediately think of like 10 different like memorable characters from the series, which is like 8 more than you can think of from like a lot of the shows that are out these days. This is totally a great watch, whether you're a fan of the series, whether you're not, whether you're bought into the superhero thing or whether you're not. And again, it's 13 episodes. You can binge it on Netflix. Go for it. This is really good shit.
Yeah, we're watching
it too. Definitely. How many episodes in are we, Jim? 6?
I don't know, 6 or 7, yeah, something like that.
Oh, right on.
So far, so good. Yeah. But yeah, it's got David Tennant in it, right?
Yes, which I've been enjoying. Although
I'm not sure I like his character all that much, to be honest.
Well, here's the thing.
As a villain.
Here's the thing. He's channeling his doctor performance a bit. And that's kind of bugging me a little bit because it's making me really like him, and he does really terrible things, and I don't know how to feel, but that's kind of brilliant.
And that's why it works so well. It's the same reason Daredevil worked so well for me. They made both of the villains both very relatable and very heinous. The D'Onofrio character in Daredevil, I don't think either of these series works without the villains being as well-rounded as they are. And again, I don't want to get into it because you guys aren't there, but they definitely let Tennant do a lot of fun things in the series all the way through. So
yeah, it looks like it's got promise.
Indeed. Mm-hmm. What about you, Jim?
I am gonna plug a movie we saw. Will, did you plug Spotlight last week?
I sure did. Go for it.
Well, I'm not going to plug it because you plugged it last week.
No, I mean, we can double plug.
We saw that one, and we could double plug it.
Yeah, we can double plug it.
Let's double plug it. No. Yeah. I'm going to plug another movie that I know you saw too called Brooklyn. This one's kind of under the radar, I think, for a lot of people. It is I don't know how to describe it. I guess I'll just say it's an epic romance movie. And I'll give you a bit of a synopsis real quick. Saoirse Ronan plays a young Irish immigrant who lands in 1950s Brooklyn, New York, where she quickly falls into a new romance. And then her past starts catching up with her, and she has to choose between the two countries, her new country of the U.S., city of New York, and her past, which is back in Ireland. It's a really wonderfully acted, wonderfully written, paced, and photographed movie. It's beautiful to look at. It's a romance, so it's not really an action movie. It's all about the relationships and this Saoirse Ronan actress carries the whole movie, and I think she does a really good job. I loved the relationships in this movie, especially the first relationship. the dude who plays her first love, I guess it's Tony, right? Really is really kind of caught me off guard. He's really good, and the two of them together have quite a chemistry. And Julie Walters is in this. She plays the boarding house mom, and she's been in Harry Potter, Educating Rita, a lot of movies, and there's a little bit of comedy thrown in there with that character. But I think this is worth checking out if you're the type of person who once in a while, hey, I could watch an epic romance. I could go for that. Check this one out. I think it's probably going to be talked about at the end of come awards time a little bit. You may see some Saoirse Ronan mentioned, especially. So yeah, check it out.
And probably costume design too.
Maybe. Yeah.
Interesting thing about this one, very very tiny story. So I get press passes from time to time, like for different films. My press contact is like, okay, bring a +1 to this thing. And so usually I take my boyfriend Scott to those. But if he can't because of work, I've got my other friend Tom who comes with me.
Yep.
And it just so happens that the last 3 movies that I ended up taking him to, by complete chance, were this movie, Brooklyn. Before that, it was Far From the Madding Crowd, and before that, it was Belle. And so at the end of this one, we both really enjoyed Brooklyn. We had some great conversation about its themes, all that sort of thing in the parking lot. And then he was like, all right, well, next time there's a movie that my mom would love, make sure to give me the invite. Yeah, so when I think of this movie, I just think of that, like, your mom will love this movie.
Oh, it's so funny because, when we went to see this film, I think, Jim, you were probably the second youngest person in the crowd.
Didn't we see Creed and Brooklyn in the same day?
We did.
Back to back.
We did a double feature, and it was funny because we had like a very age, ethnicity diverse crowd for Creed, and then we came into Brooklyn, and it was all like white people over 65.
It was all the blue hairs, yeah.
You know what I mean? So anyway, yeah, no, good movie. It was definitely interesting, but I'm just kind of, I was thinking about that. Like, of course, people who lived through the 50s are gonna come see this movie, just like I go see movies that are set in the 80s, right? Because that's like, I think the 80s are dragging my heart through time like an anchor. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I just naturally go back to. You know what I mean? And so I totally get it. I totally understand it. And I thought it was kind of cool to see a lot of these elderly statesman folk, seeing this movie and enjoying, sort of the period pieces. And Jim, you went to the bathroom after this movie, but I was kind of hanging in the hall because I have a bigger bladder.
I do after every movie. Yeah.
Right, and I have a bigger bladder, so I got to remain in the hallway and listen to some of the conversation. I heard this one lady, she was getting emotional, and she was like, she was clearly like, I don't know, 70, 75. She was like, that's so much like this boy that I met in New York, and I had to move away, and we couldn't be together, and I heard he died a couple of years ago, and I heard from his sister who let me know.
Oh, wow.
And it just really touched me. You know what I mean? Like, in a good way. Like, I think it's kind of awesome that movies can really impact people that way and destroy you from the inside out. So hey, good stuff. Anyway, all right. Well, I think
this is why I love movies. They're destroying me from the inside out.
Right? Inside out.
Frame by frame.
Oh, well, I think that wraps us for this week, guys. Next week, Krampus? I don't know what we're doing.
Let's get festive. My vote is very squarely for Krampus.
Yeah. Is it Krampus? It's spelled Krampus, but is it Krampus?
Krampus.
Krampus, like it's like a with the upside down, like, or is it like the A with the U above it? Like, is that
the problem is that I'm from Texas, and I do a fairly good job, I think, most of the time of like making sure that I don't have a drawl. But there are certain words, like when I see Krampus, it's hard for me to say Krampus. Like it comes out Krampus for me.
Krampus.
So if I mispronounce it, just blame my roots.
All right. Well, sounds good to me. I'm aboard. Jim,
all right. So all you listeners, go see Krampus, and then come back and listen to our review.
That's right. It's almost like you can tell the future. You know what we're going to be reviewing.
I have a feeling it's going to be. I think it's going to be a popular. Let's go see this movie on the weekend kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Since the trailers first dropped, people have been excited about this. Like, I'm not saying that this is going to be like the next.
It could be very.
It's going to do, $1 billion internationally. It's not going to be that type of.
It could be the next Annabelle. You never know. It could be that good.
Maybe. It could be. Do we need to pair it with something else that would draw? I don't know. Is it time? Is it time for Back to the Future 3 yet? Are we at that point?
I don't know, man. That one's going to have to go to committee.
Okay.
Well, I don't. That's a weird pairing. That's a weird pairing.
Compass to the Future? I don't know. We'll figure it out.
But yeah, we'll figure it out.
And then got to give a shout out to the longtime listener and Movie Bear friend Felipe here in Tucson. Guys, he had an idea that I think could potentially save us the week of the 17th. Okay. The only thing coming out that week is like Heart in the Heart of the Sea or whatever that weekend before.
Yeah.
So rather, I'm sorry, not the 17th. I guess that date would be the 14th.
Right.
So what do you think about in preparation for The Force Awakens, revisiting the Star Wars movies the week before? Maybe
kind of a Star Wars prequel, like warm up.
Yeah.
Warm up for
So yeah, just kind of us talking about the franchise in general.
Well, or just starting with some of the movies and kind of talking through like the original trilogy. What did we like and what did we not like? And
so before The Force Awakens, you have the Force's alarm clock. So that's kind of what would be.
Nice. I don't know. Something to think about.
Yeah, I think if we limit it to like the 6 movies and just kind of keep it there, I could be down for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could be good. I think that could be fun. Anyway, we'll firm that up for sure in any event. Guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us this week. We always love having you guys pal around with us on our Google Hangout. You can find most of our, well, gosh, not even most of our episodes. Get this, guys, in iTunes, our most recent, or our oldest episode in iTunes is like episode 84 or something, because we're like up to 159 at this point. So
that's right.
It keeps like a certain number of them. Thankfully, they're all available on Libsyn, and we're steadily getting more available on our website. But it feels kind of cool to have like a whole back catalog now that like only exists in the archives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, goodbye, everybody. See you next week. Take care. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, all.